The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of my garage, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the November night. I was hunched over my 1987 Harley Davidson, trying to fix a carburetor that had more attitude than my wife's real estate clients, when I heard Talia's voice drifting through the thin walls of our house. "Oh, Andre, you're so bad." She giggled into her phone, her voice carrying that breathy quality I hadn't heard directed at me in about 3 years. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow night. The red dress you bought me is perfect." I froze, my hand still reaching for the fallen wrench. Calvin Reed, 43 years old, city zoning inspector for the past 15 years, suddenly felt like the biggest fool in suburban Michigan. The woman I'd been married to for 12 years was having what was obviously not a business conversation at 10:30 on a Tuesday night. I straightened up slowly, wiping my hands on an old shop rag, and listened as my wife continued her intimate chat with someone who definitely wasn't discussing property values. Through the window that connected the garage to our kitchen, I could see Talia pacing back and forth, her blonde hair catching the overhead light, her free hand gesturing animatedly as she spoke. "You know what you do to me," she purred, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Cal's working late again anyway. He never pays attention to anything except those boring zoning reports." Well, I thought grimly, adjusting my Detroit Tigers cap, at least she got that part right. I did spend a lot of time with zoning reports. It's what paid for this house in the suburbs, her BMW, and apparently the red dress she was planning to wear for Andre, whoever the hell he was. I'd always known I wasn't exactly Talia's dream man. She'd made that clear enough over the years, especially after she'd gotten her real estate license and started moving in circles that included people who drove cars worth more than my annual salary. But hearing her talk to another man like that felt like taking a sledgehammer to the chest. The kitchen door opened and Talia appeared, still holding her phone but having ended the call. She was wearing yoga pants and a tank top that showed off the figure she maintained with religious dedication to her personal trainer. At 37, she looked better than she had when we'd met, which only made this whole situation more humiliating. "Cal? What are you doing out here so late?" she asked, but her tone was distracted, like she was asking out of obligation rather than genuine interest. "Trying to fix the carburetor," I said, gesturing toward the motorcycle. "Thought I might take it out this weekend if the weather holds." She wrinkled her nose. "That old thing, I don't know why you don't just get rid of it. It's taking up half the garage." I looked at the Harley, which took up maybe a quarter of our 2-car garage, and then back at my wife. "It was my dad's bike, Talia. You know that." I know," she said with an exaggerated sigh. "Everything in this house has some sentimental story attached to it. Sometimes I think you care more about old junk than you do about moving forward in life." There it was again, that subtle dig about my lack of ambition that had been creeping into more and more of our conversations. According to Talia, I should be running my own consulting firm by now, or at least working for the county instead of the city. The fact that I actually enjoyed my job and was good at it didn't seem to matter. "Speaking of moving forward," she continued, leaning against the door frame, "I'm having dinner with some clients tomorrow night, big investors from Chicago. This could be huge for my career." "That's great," I said, though something in her posture told me this wasn't exactly the whole truth. "Where are you meeting them?" "The Riverside Inn," she said quickly. "You know, that new place downtown, very upscale." I nodded, filing away the information. The Riverside Inn was indeed upscale, and it was also the kind of place where people went for romantic dinners, not business meetings. But I didn't say anything. Instead, I picked up my wrench and turned back to the motorcycle. "Don't wait up," Talia added. "These things can go pretty late." "Sure," I said without looking up. "Have fun with your clients." She disappeared back into the house, and I heard her footsteps on the stairs leading to our bedroom. I stood there in the garage for a long time, staring at the Harley's engine and thinking about red dresses and men named Andre. The next day at work, I found myself distracted during a routine inspection of a new strip mall development. My mind kept wandering back to Talia's phone conversation, and I caught myself making mistakes in my measurements that I'd never made before. "You okay, Cal?" asked Jerry Morrison, the site foreman I'd been working with for the past 5 years. "You seem a little off today." "Just tired," I lied, adjusting my hard hat and focusing on the task at hand. "Long night." Jerry nodded sympathetically. He was divorced himself, had been for about 3 years, and sometimes made comments about how much better his life was now. At the time, I'd always felt sorry for him. Now I was starting to wonder if he'd been the smart one. I finished the inspection and drove back to the city offices, a cluster of unremarkable buildings downtown that housed everything from the mayor's office to the water department. My cubicle was on the 3rd floor, sandwiched between Martha Henley from building permits and Tom Rodriguez from environmental compliance. "How's Talia doing?" Martha asked as I settled into my desk chair. She was in her 50s, had been married to the same man for 30 years, and always asked about everyone's family. "I saw her picture in the paper last week for that big sale on Maple Street." "She's doing great," I said, booting up my computer, really making a name for herself. "That's wonderful," Martha said warmly. "You must be so proud." I was proud, or at least I had been. Talia had worked hard to build her real estate career from nothing, and she was genuinely good at it. She had a talent for reading people and knowing exactly what they wanted to hear. I was just starting to realize that this talent wasn't limited to her professional life. The day dragged on, and by 5 o'clock I was more than ready to head home. But instead of taking my usual route, I found myself driving toward downtown, specifically toward the Riverside Inn. I told myself I was just curious, that maybe I'd misunderstood what I'd heard the night before. I parked across the street from the restaurant and waited. At exactly 6:30, Talia's BMW pulled into the valet parking area. She stepped out wearing a red dress that I'd never seen before, something that hugged her curves and probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She wasn't alone. A man emerged from the passenger side of her car, tall and well-dressed, with the kind of confident swagger that came from having money. He was probably in his late 30s, with dark hair and the kind of tan that suggested recent vacations to expensive places. He put his hand on the small of Talia's back as they walked toward the restaurant entrance, and she leaned into him in a way that made it very clear this was not a business dinner. I sat in my truck for another hour, watching through the restaurant's large windows as my wife laughed and flirted with her companion. They sat close together, touching frequently, sharing food from each other's plates. At one point, she reached across the table and straightened his tie, a gesture so intimate and familiar that it made my chest ache. When they finally left the restaurant, they didn't get back in Talia's car. Instead, they walked hand in hand to a black Mercedes that was parked nearby. The man opened the passenger door for her, and she kissed him before getting in. Not a peck on the cheek, but a real kiss, the kind married people give each other when they're still in love. I followed them at a distance, feeling like a character in one of those detective movies I used to watch with my dad. They drove to the Hampton Inn on the outskirts of town, and I watched from the parking lot as they disappeared into the building together. I sat there for a long time, engine running, heat blasting, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Part of me wanted to march into that hotel and confront them both. Part of me wanted to drive home and pretend I'd never seen anything. But mostly I just felt numb. Eventually, I drove home to our empty house and sat in the living room, surrounded by the furniture we'd picked out together, the wedding photos on the mantel, the life we'd built that was apparently just an elaborate lie. I thought about calling someone, but who? My parents were gone. I didn't have any siblings, and most of our friends were really Talia's friends from the real estate world. At midnight, I heard her car in the driveway. She came through the front door quietly. probably expecting me to be asleep. Instead, she found me sitting on the couch in the dark. "Cal?" she said, sounding startled. "What are you doing up?" "Couldn't sleep," I said. "How was your business dinner?" Even in the dim light from the street lamp outside, I could see her hesitate. "It was good. Productive. These Chicago investors are really interested in some of the properties I showed them." "That's great," I said. "I'm glad it went well." She stood there for a moment, and I wondered if she was going to say something else, maybe tell me the truth. Instead, she just said, "I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed." I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, heard the shower running, and eventually heard the bedroom door close. I stayed on the couch until dawn, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out when exactly my marriage had turned into a lie. The next few weeks passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Talia continued her business meetings with increasing frequency, always with some excuse about Chicago investors or out-of-town clients. I continued going to work, inspecting buildings and reviewing zoning applications, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. The breaking point came on a Friday night in December. Talia had announced that she was hosting a dinner party for some of her real estate colleagues, and she'd spent the entire day preparing. Our dining room table was set with our good china, candles were lit, and the smell of her famous beef bourguignon filled the house. The guests started arriving at 7. I recognized most of them from previous gatherings: Susan Walsh from Talia's office, the Hendersons who owned a property management company, and a few other couples from the local real estate scene. But there were also some new faces, including a woman I'd never met before, who introduced herself as Brielle Reed. "I'm Talia's sister," she explained, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "I just moved here from Portland." I stared at her for a moment, confused. Brielle looked to be in her early 30s, with the same blonde hair as Talia, but a softer, more natural beauty. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, a stark contrast to the designer outfits worn by most of Talia's friends. "I didn't know Talia had a sister," I said, which earned me a sharp look from my wife across the room. "We've been estranged for a while," Brielle explained quietly. "Family drama, but I'm trying to make amends." The evening progressed normally enough until Andre arrived. He was the same man I'd seen at the restaurant, and watching him walk into my house and greet my wife with a casual kiss on both cheeks made me feel physically ill. He was introduced to the group as Andre Voss, a real estate investor from Chicago who was looking to expand into the Michigan market. "Cal here is our local zoning expert," Talia said when Andre was introduced to me. "He can tell you everything you need to know about building codes and permits." Andre's handshake was firm, his smile confident. "Pleasure to meet you, Cal. Talia's told me so much about you." I bet she has, I thought grimly. As the evening wore on, I found myself watching the interaction between Talia and Andre. They were careful not to be too obvious, but there were subtle signs everywhere. The way she laughed a little too loudly at his jokes, how she found excuses to touch his arm when she spoke to him, the meaningful glances they shared across the room. What bothered me even more was how she treated me in front of everyone. Every comment I made was met with an eye roll or a condescending smile. When I mentioned a new development project I was working on, she actually said, "Oh, Cal's always so excited about his little inspections. It's cute, really." The other guests laughed politely, but I felt my face burning with embarrassment. This wasn't playful teasing between spouses. This was deliberate humiliation. The final straw came during dessert. Andre was telling a story about a luxury condo development he'd financed in Chicago, and someone asked about the zoning challenges he'd faced. "Oh, that's easy," Talia said with a dismissive wave. "You just need to know the right people. Cal could never handle something like that. He's more of a small-town, small dreams kind of guy." The room fell silent for a moment, and I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me. I set down my coffee cup carefully and looked at my wife. "Excuse me?" I said quietly. Talia seemed to realize she'd gone too far, But instead of backing down, she doubled down. I'm just saying, honey, you're not exactly the ambitious type. You've been doing the same job for 15 years. Some people want more out of life. Some people, I said, my voice still calm but with an edge to it, appreciate loyalty and consistency. Some people think there's value in doing a job well, even if it's not glamorous. See? Talia said to the table, as if I'd just proved her point. This is what I mean. No vision, no drive to improve himself. I felt something snap inside me. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You know what, Talia? I said, and now my voice was loud enough that everyone could hear it clearly. You're absolutely right. I'm not ambitious enough for you. I don't make enough money for you. I don't drive the right car or wear the right clothes or know the right people. So here's a question for you. Why did you marry me? Talia's face went pale, but she wasn't backing down. You really want to know? She said, standing up as well. Because I thought you had potential. I thought you might actually amount to something someday. But you're exactly the same boring, small-minded person you were when we met. The room was silent now. I could feel the tension radiating from every guest, but I was past caring about social niceties. Well then, I said, I guess you made a mistake. Maybe you should have married someone else, someone more your speed. Maybe I should have, Talia shouted, her composure finally cracking. Why did I ever marry you? I should have let my sister have you. She always wanted you. The words hung in the air like a slap. I glanced at Brielle, who looked absolutely mortified, her face bright red with embarrassment. The other guests were staring at their plates, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. But it was Brielle who broke the silence. She stood up slowly, walked around the table, and stopped directly in front of me. Without saying a word, she reached up, put her hands on either side of my face, and kissed me. Not a peck on the cheek, but a real kiss, soft and warm and completely unexpected. When she pulled away, she looked directly at Talia and said, You're free now. Talia's mouth fell open, and for the first time in years, she was completely speechless. The dinner party broke up quickly after that, with guests making hasty excuses and rushing out the door. Andre left without saying goodbye to anyone, and I noticed that he avoided making eye contact with me entirely. When the house was finally empty, the three of us stood in the dining room surrounded by dirty dishes and the wreckage of what had been my marriage. I should go, Brielle said quietly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make things worse. You didn't make anything worse, I said. You just brought the truth out into the open. Talia was still standing by her chair, looking shell-shocked. Cal, Don't, I said, holding up my hand. Just don't. We both know this has been over for a long time. Tonight just made it official. I turned to Brielle. Where are you staying? The Marriott downtown, she said. I was planning to look for an apartment this weekend. Let me give you my number, I said, pulling out my phone, in case you need help with anything, finding your way around town, recommendations, whatever. We exchanged numbers while Talia watched in silence. Then Brielle gathered her purse and coat. Thank you for dinner, she said to Talia, her voice politely neutral. It was enlightening. After she left, Talia and I faced each other across our destroyed dining room. Cal, we need to talk, she said. No, I said, already heading toward the stairs. We really don't. I'm going to bed. You can clean up your own mess. I left her standing there and went upstairs to our bedroom. I gathered some clothes and toiletries and moved them to the guest room down the hall. It wasn't much of a statement, but it was a start. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about Brielle's kiss and the way Talia had looked when she realized she'd finally pushed me too far. For the first time in months, I felt something other than numbness. I felt angry, and anger I was beginning to realize might be exactly what I needed. The next morning, I woke up in the guest room with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Talia had already left the house by the time I came downstairs, probably to avoid the conversation she'd wanted to have the night before. Fine by me. I had things to do. My first stop was the office of David Martinez, a divorce attorney whose business card I'd been carrying in my wallet for the past month. I'd taken it from a bulletin board at the courthouse during a routine permit filing, telling myself I was just being practical. Now I was grateful for that moment of foresight. Martinez was a no-nonsense guy in his 50s who specialized in what he called high-conflict divorces. After I explained the situation, he leaned back in his chair and studied me over his reading glasses. "How long have you suspected the affair?" he asked. "About a month," I said. "But last night confirmed it." "Do you have any evidence? Photos, texts, financial records showing unexplained expenses?" I shook my head. "I saw them together at a restaurant and a hotel, but I didn't take pictures. I wasn't really thinking like that at the time." Martinez nodded. "That's normal. Most people aren't prepared for this kind of situation. But if we're going to protect your interests, we need to be smart about how we proceed. Michigan is a no-fault divorce state, which means the affair itself won't affect the settlement. But if we can prove she's been hiding assets or spending marital funds on her relationship, that's a different story." He handed me a folder full of forms and information packets. "Start documenting everything. Bank statements, credit card bills, her schedule, any unusual expenses. And whatever you do, don't confront her about the affair until we have a strategy in place." I left his office feeling like I had a plan for the first time in weeks. My next stop was the bank, where I opened a separate checking account and arranged to have my paychecks deposited there instead of our joint account. It wasn't much, but it was a start toward financial independence. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Brielle. "I owe you an apology for last night. Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" We met at a small cafe downtown, away from the places where Talia and her real estate friends typically hung out. Brielle looked tired, like she hadn't slept much either. "I'm sorry about the kiss," she said as soon as we sat down. "That was completely inappropriate. Seeing her treat you like that made me so angry." "Don't apologize," I said. "It was the most honest thing that happened all evening." She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Talia called me this morning. She's furious. She thinks I planned the whole thing to sabotage her dinner party." "Did you?" "No," Brielle said firmly, "but I can't say I'm sorry it happened. She needed to be called out for the way she was treating you." I studied her face, trying to reconcile this woman with the sister Talia had never mentioned in 12 years of marriage. "Can I ask you something? Why didn't I know you existed until last night?" Brielle's expression darkened. "Because Talia's been lying to you about a lot of things. We weren't estranged by choice, Cal. She cut me out of her life when she started dating you because she was afraid I'd interfere with her plans." "What plans?" "To marry someone stable and respectable who could give her the life she wanted," Brielle said bluntly. "You were never her great love, Cal. You were her security blanket. And when she got confident enough in her career to think she didn't need security anymore, she started looking for excitement elsewhere." The words stung, but they also rang true. I thought back to our early relationship, how Talia had been struggling to get her real estate license and working as a receptionist at a property management company. I'd been the steady paycheck, the reliable guy who could help her build the life she wanted. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "Because she told me," Brielle said. 3 years ago, she called me out of the blue and said she was thinking about leaving you. She wanted my advice about whether she should have an affair or just file for divorce. I told her she should try marriage counseling first, or at least have an honest conversation with you about what she was feeling. She hung up on me, and we haven't spoken since. I felt a cold anger building in my chest. "She's been planning this for 3 years?" "Planning might be too strong a word," Brielle said, "but she's been keeping her options open. And now that she's found someone who can give her the lifestyle she wants, she's ready to make her move." We sat in silence for a moment, and I found myself really looking at Brielle for the first time. She had Talia's bone structure and coloring, but there was a warmth in her eyes that her sister lacked. She was beautiful in a natural, understated way that was completely different from Talia's polished perfection. "What do you do for work?" I asked, partly to change the subject and partly because I was genuinely curious. "I'm a graphic designer," she said. "Freelance mostly. I can work from anywhere, which is why I was able to move here. I thought maybe Talia and I could repair our relationship, but after last night, I'm not sure that's possible." "Where are you planning to live?" "I don't know yet. I was looking at apartments, but everything decent is pretty expensive. I might have to look outside the city." An idea was forming in my head, crazy but appealing. "What if you didn't have to pay rent?" She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if you stayed in my house, in the guest room, just temporarily until you figure out what you want to do long term?" Brielle stared at me. "Cal, that would drive Talia absolutely insane." "I know," I said, and realized I was smiling for the first time in weeks. "That's kind of the point." She laughed, a genuine sound that made something warm spread through my chest. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Absolutely serious. Look, I'm probably going to be filing for divorce soon anyway. Having a witness to Talia's behavior might actually be helpful, and honestly, I could use the company. That house feels pretty empty these days." Brielle considered this for a long moment. "It would certainly send a message." "It would send exactly the right message." She grinned. "Okay, but I pay for groceries and utilities. I'm not going to be a freeloader." We shook hands on it, and I felt like I'd just made the first proactive decision I'd made in months. When I got home that evening, Talia was waiting for me in the living room, still wearing her work clothes. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "About what?" "About last night, about us, about where we go from here." I sat down in the chair across from her, maintaining some distance. "Okay, talk." She took a deep breath. "I know I said some things that hurt you. I was angry and embarrassed, and I lashed out. But Cal, we can't just throw away 12 years of marriage over one fight." "This isn't about one fight, Talia. This is about the fact that you've been lying to me for months, maybe years." Her face went carefully blank. "What are you talking about?" "Andre Voss," I said simply. I watched her face for any sign of recognition or guilt, but she was good at this. Her expression didn't change at all. "What about him?" "He's a potential client." "Is that what we're calling it now?" "Cal, I don't know what you think you know, but I know you were at the Riverside Inn with him 3 weeks ago," I said. "I know you went to the Hampton Inn together afterward. I know you've been having business meetings that always seem to run late into the night." Now her composure cracked, just slightly. "You followed me?" "I didn't have to follow you very far. You weren't exactly being discreet." Talia was quiet for a long moment, and I could almost see her calculating her next move. Finally, she sighed. "Okay, yes, Andre and I have been seeing each other. But Cal, it's not what you think. It's not some sordid affair. We have a real connection. He understands my ambitions in a way that you never have." The casual way she said it, like she was discussing the weather, hit me harder than any shouting match could have. "How long?" I asked. 6 months, she said. "But Cal, it doesn't have to end our marriage. Lots of couples work through this kind of thing. We could try counseling, or maybe we could even work out some kind of arrangement." "An arrangement?" "An open marriage. You could see other people too. We could stay married but have the freedom to—" "Stop," I said, holding up my hand. "Just stop talking." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our front yard where we'd planted a maple tree on our 5th anniversary. It was bare now, its branches stark against the gray December sky. "I've already filed for divorce," I lied smoothly, My lawyer says we can probably have this wrapped up in 6 months if we don't fight over assets. The color drained from Talia's face. Cal, you can't be serious. We can work this out. I love you. No, you don't, I said, turning back to face her. You love the idea of me. You love having someone reliable to fall back on while you explore other options. But you don't love me. That's not true. It is true. And you know what? That's okay. Because I'm done being your safety net. Talia stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her reassessing everything she thought she knew about me. What about the house? She asked finally. We'll figure it out. But in the meantime, I'm going to need you to move out. Move out? Cal, this is my home too. Actually, it's not, I said. It's my house. I bought it before we got married, remember? You're welcome to take whatever belongs to you, but I want you out by the end of the week. This was a bluff. I'd need to check with my lawyer about the legalities, but it had the desired effect. Talia looked genuinely shaken for the first time. Where am I supposed to go? I'm sure Andre can help you figure something out, I said. Or you could get your own place. You're a successful real estate agent. I'm sure you can find something suitable. I headed toward the stairs, then paused and looked back at her. Oh, and Talia? Brielle's going to be staying in the guest room for a while. I thought you should know. The look on her face was worth every moment of humiliation I'd endured over the past few months. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Talia moved out faster than I'd expected, taking only her clothes and personal items and leaving behind most of the furniture and household goods. I suspected she was staying with Andre, though she didn't volunteer that information, and I didn't ask. Brielle moved in on Wednesday, bringing with her a few suitcases and a laptop computer that served as her mobile office. Having her in the house changed the entire atmosphere. Where Talia had filled the space with tension and criticism, Brielle brought a sense of calm and genuine warmth. I can't believe how peaceful this place feels now, she said on Thursday evening, as we sat in the living room after dinner. It's like the house itself is breathing easier. I know what you mean, I said. I didn't realize how much stress I was carrying until it was gone. We'd fallen into an easy routine over the past few days. Brielle worked from the guest room during the day while I was at the office, and in the evenings we cooked dinner together and talked about everything from our childhoods to our career goals. It was the kind of comfortable domesticity I'd thought I had with Talia, but now realized had been missing for years. Can I ask you something? Brielle said, curling up on the couch with a cup of tea. What made you finally stand up to her? I mean, from what I could see, you'd been putting up with her treatment for a long time. I thought about it for a moment. I think it was hearing her talk to Andre on the phone that first night. The way her voice changed when she was talking to him. It made me realize that she was capable of being loving and warm and excited about someone. It just wasn't me. That must have hurt. It did. But it also made me angry. Not just because she was cheating, but because she'd been making me feel like I was the problem. Like I wasn't good enough, or ambitious enough, or interesting enough. When really, she just didn't love me anymore. Brielle set down her tea and looked at me seriously. Cal, can I tell you something? From the outside, looking at your marriage, it always seemed like Talia was the one who wasn't good enough for you. What do you mean? I mean you're kind and funny and genuine. You care about doing your job well, you're loyal to the people you love, and you don't need to put other people down to feel good about yourself. Those are rare qualities. I felt my face warming at the compliment. Thank you. That means a lot, especially coming from you. Why especially from me? I hesitated, not sure how much I should reveal. Because I think you're pretty amazing yourself, and because I've been wondering what might have happened if I'd met you first, 12 years ago. The words hung in the air between us, and I immediately regretted saying them. It was too soon, too complicated, too much. But Brielle didn't look uncomfortable. Instead, she smiled. I've been wondering the same thing. Before I could respond, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Talia's name. I should probably take this, I said apologetically. Cal, we need to meet, Talia said as soon as I answered. There are things we need to discuss about the divorce. Okay. When and where? Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, the Riverside Inn. I almost laughed at the choice of location. Seriously? The same place where you had your first date with Andre? There was a pause. How did you… Never mind. Can you be there or not? I'll be there. After I hung up, Brielle raised an eyebrow. That sounded ominous. She wants to meet tomorrow night to discuss the divorce, probably going to try to negotiate for a bigger settlement. Are you nervous? Not really, I said, and realized it was true. I think I'm past the point of being intimidated by Talia. The next evening, I arrived at the Riverside Inn a few minutes early and was shown to a table in the back corner. The restaurant was busy, filled with couples on date nights and business dinners, and I couldn't help but think about Talia and Andre sitting in this same dining room just a few weeks earlier. Talia arrived exactly on time, looking polished and professional in a black dress and heels. She'd clearly put effort into her appearance, and I wondered if this was part of some strategy to win me back. Thank you for coming, she said as she sat down across from me. Of course. What did you want to discuss? She ordered a glass of wine, and I stuck with water, another small indication of how different we'd become. When the server left, Talia leaned forward and fixed me with the intense gaze that had once made my heart race. Cal, I've been doing a lot of thinking since our conversation the other day. About us, about our marriage, about what I really want. Okay. I think I made a mistake. With Andre, I mean. I got caught up in the excitement of something new, but it made me lose sight of what really matters. I waited for her to continue, genuinely curious about where this was going. What really matters is the life we built together, the history we share, the foundation we created. Andre can't give me that. He's exciting, but he's not substantial, not like you. Talia, let me finish, she said, holding up her hand. I know I hurt you. I know I said terrible things and treated you badly, but people make mistakes, Cal. That doesn't mean we have to throw away everything we built together. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I want to try again. I want us to go to counseling and work through this. I want to remember why we fell in love in the first place. I looked down at her hand covering mine and felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no lingering love. Just a mild sadness for what we'd lost and a clear certainty about what needed to happen next. I appreciate you saying that, I said gently, pulling my hand away. But it's too late. It's not too late. Cal, we can fix this. No, we can't. And honestly, I don't want to. Talia's composed expression faltered. What do you mean? I mean, I've realized that our marriage was over long before you started seeing Andre. We just didn't want to admit it. We became roommates who shared expenses, not partners who shared a life. That's not true. It is true. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time we laughed together or planned a future together, or even just enjoyed each other's company? Talia was quiet for a moment, and I could see her trying to come up with an answer. We can get that back, she said finally. If we both work at it. I don't want to get it back, I said firmly. I want something real. I want to be with someone who actually likes me, not someone who sees me as a consolation prize. Is this about Brielle? Talia asked, and there was an edge to her voice now. Because if you think she actually cares about you, you're deluding yourself. She's just trying to get back at me for cutting her out of my life. This isn't about Brielle, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. This is about me finally realizing that I deserve better than what we had. Talia stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her reassessing her approach. When she spoke again, her tone was different, harder, more calculating. Fine, she said. If that's how you want to play this, let's talk about the practical realities. I've been doing some research on divorce settlements in Michigan. Even though the house was yours before we married, I'm entitled to half the increase in value during our marriage, plus spousal support, since I supported your career by managing our household and social obligations. I almost smiled at the sudden shift from reconciliation to negotiation. This was the Talia I knew, always working an angle. I've been doing some research too, I said. Turns out adultery might not affect property division, but it definitely affects spousal support, especially when the cheating spouse has been using marital assets to fund their affair. Talia's face went pale. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken of our credit card statements over the past week. Let's see. Dinner at the Riverside Inn, $300. Room at the Hampton Inn, $250. Shopping trip to Victoria's Secret, $400. Should I go on? Those were business expenses. Really? Business expenses paid for with our joint credit card? I'm sure your accountant will be very interested in that explanation. Talia was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her calculating the financial implications. What do you want? She asked finally. I want a clean break. You keep your car, your clothes, your jewelry, and your retirement account. I keep the house, my car, and my retirement account. No spousal support either way. We split the contents of our joint checking account and call it even. That's not fair. You're entitled to what you can prove in court, I said. And given the evidence I have of your affair, I don't think a judge is going to be very sympathetic to your claims. Talia glared at me across the table, and for a moment I saw a flash of the anger that had been building between us for months. You know what? She said. Fine. Take your house and your precious moral high ground. But don't think this makes you the winner, Cal. You're still the same boring, small-minded person you always were. Andre might not be perfect, but at least he has vision. At least he wants more out of life than a steady paycheck and a quiet retirement. I signaled for the check and stood up. You're absolutely right, Talia. I am boring and small-minded and completely lacking in vision. And you know what? I'm okay with that, because I'd rather be boring and honest than exciting and fake. I left her sitting at the table and walked out of the restaurant, feeling lighter with every step. When I got home, Brielle was waiting in the living room with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. How did it go? She asked. Better than expected, I said, sitting down beside her on the couch. I think we'll have the divorce finalized within a few months. She poured us each a glass of wine and raised hers in a toast. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, I agreed. And when our glasses clinked together, I felt like I was finally ready to start the next chapter of my life. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Talia had agreed to my terms without further argument, probably because her lawyer had explained the same things mine had, that her affair had put her in a weak negotiating position, and that fighting for more would likely cost her more in legal fees than she could hope to gain. She'd moved in with Andre, as I'd suspected, and according to the local real estate gossip that occasionally reached me through mutual acquaintances, they were planning to get married as soon as her divorce was final. I wished them well, and I actually meant it. They deserved each other. Brielle had found her own apartment by then, a nice place downtown that was perfect for her freelance business. But she spent most evenings at my house, and most mornings she was there when I woke up. We hadn't talked about making it official, but we both knew where things were heading. I have something to tell you, she said one evening in March, as we sat on the back porch, watching the sunset and planning our weekend. What's that? Talia called me today. I raised an eyebrow. That's interesting. What did she want? She wanted to apologize and to warn me about you. Warn you about what? Brielle grinned. She said you were boring and set in your ways, and that I'd get tired of you eventually, just like she did. She said I was making a mistake by getting involved with you. And what did you tell her? I told her that boring was underrated, that I'd spent enough time with exciting, unpredictable men to know that what I really wanted was someone steady and kind and genuine, someone who would still be there when the excitement wore off. I leaned over and kissed her, still amazed that this woman had chosen me over all the other options available to her. "There's something else," Brielle said when we broke apart. "She's pregnant." I felt a momentary pang of something, not jealousy exactly, but a complex mix of emotions I couldn't quite identify. "How do you feel about that?" Brielle asked, watching my face carefully. "Honestly? I feel sorry for the kid," I said. "But I hope they'll be happy together. I hope having a baby will give Talia the sense of purpose she was always looking for." "You really mean that, don't you?" "I do. I'm not angry at her anymore, Brielle. I'm grateful. If she hadn't cheated, if she hadn't pushed me to my breaking point that night at dinner, I never would have found the courage to leave. And I never would have found you." Brielle smiled and settled back against my chest. "So what happens now?" "Now we figure out what we want our life to look like," I said. "Together." "I have some ideas about that," she said, and there was a mischievous note in her voice that I'd learned to recognize. "Such as?" "Such as, I think you should quit your job with the city and start your own consulting firm. You're good at what you do, Cal, and you could make twice as much money working for yourself." I'd actually been thinking the same thing lately, but hearing her say it made it seem more real, more possible. "And," she continued, "I think we should get married." I nearly choked on my beer. "Are you proposing to me?" "Maybe I am. Is that a problem?" I set down my beer and turned to face her fully. "Brielle Reed, are you seriously asking me to marry you?" "I'm seriously asking you to marry me," she said, and despite her playful tone, I could see that she was nervous. "In that case," I said, pulling her into my arms, "I seriously accept." We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony in our backyard, with just a few close friends and Brielle's parents, who had flown in from Portland. It was everything my first wedding hadn't been: intimate, genuine, and filled with people who actually wanted to be there. As I watched Brielle walk down the makeshift aisle we'd created between the flower beds, wearing a simple white dress and carrying wildflowers from our garden, I thought about how different my life had become in just 1 year. I'd gone from feeling trapped and undervalued to feeling genuinely excited about the future. During the reception, as we danced to an old Johnny Cash song on our back patio, Brielle whispered in my ear, "Do you ever regret it? The way everything happened with Talia?" "Never," I said without hesitation. "Do you regret kissing me that night at dinner?" "Never," she echoed, and then she laughed. "Although I still can't believe I did that. It was so unlike me." "It was perfect," I said. "It was exactly what I needed to hear, even if I didn't know it at the time." "What did you need to hear?" "That someone could actually want me. Not as a backup plan or a safety net, but as a first choice." Brielle stopped dancing and looked up at me seriously. "Cal, you will always be my first choice. In every lifetime, in every scenario, in every possible world. You're not my consolation prize. You're my jackpot." As we swayed together under the string